Welcome back to Bedtime Blocks. Tonight, we've got 6 Reddit stories that dig deep into love, lies, and betrayal, cheating, heartbreak, even secrets hidden in plain sight. It makes you wonder, how well do we ever really know the people closest to us? So, get cozy, settle in, and let's dive right into it. Story 1. She cheated in our bed. She cheated on me, and I knew it from the smell. It wasn't perfume or sweat. It was a sharp, peppery cologne I'd never worn, cutting through the quiet like a match struck in a dark room. The house had that late evening stillness, the fridge humming, the soft whir of the ceiling fan, the curtains breathing in and out with the breeze. The sheets were just a little crooked, the pillows pressed flat like they'd been leaned into. There was a glass with a single crescent of a lip print on the rim, and I stood there staring at it the way people stare at traffic lights after they've already turned green. "Hey," she said from the bathroom, voice too casual, water still running like applause. "You're home early." I set the grocery bag on the counter and listened to the produce settle. My hands smelled like oranges. My chest felt empty, like I'd exhaled and forgotten how to breathe in again. "Yeah," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to a calmer person. "Manager closed early." The bathroom door opened. Steam and eucalyptus drifted down the hall, warm and sweet. She was wrapped in a towel, hair gathered high, cheeks damp and pink. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that would have charmed me any other night. "I was just about to." She stopped, noticing the way I wasn't moving. "What?" I lifted the glass. "Did we switch brands?" I asked. "This smells different." She blinked, then laughed too quickly. "Oh. I think my friend Maya was wearing something strong earlier. She dropped by." She said it like tossing a ball into another yard, waiting to see if I'd throw it back. The ceiling fan ticked. Outside, a car door thudded, and a dog barked twice. I nodded like the conversation had added up, but the numbers didn't line up in my head. I could feel it, the story she hadn't told yet, the part that would make the rest make sense. I put the glass in the sink and turned on the water just to hear a sound that wasn't my own pulse. "Cool," I said. "Maya." The water ran over the lip print, blurring it to nothing. The cologne didn't blur. It hovered in the doorway like a guest who hadn't said goodbye. And that's when I knew I'd need more than a smell to tell me I wasn't crazy, so I started paying attention to the small, stubborn details that don't know how to lie. Next, I went looking for facts that wouldn't talk back. I didn't blow up, I started counting. I counted minutes on the stove clock, counted the dark hairs that weren't mine on the pillowcase, counted the little ways the night didn't match our normal. The hamper wasn't full, but it was heavier than it looked. The top shirt was inside out like it had been peeled off in a hurry. The window above our bed was cracked for fresh air, though she always said it made her nose stuffy. And there was the faintest divot on my side of the mattress, as if someone had sat there and waited for permission to cross a line. "Babe?" she called from the bedroom. "You're quiet." I went back there with 2 folded towels, gave my hands something to do. "Just tired," I said, and she watched me the way people watch waves, like she wanted to believe the water would keep behaving. I tried to picture Maya in our space. What would Maya have done? Would Maya have left behind that peppery trail, that afterglow of someone not supposed to be here? I opened the nightstand to grab my charger, and a small, unfamiliar silver button tumbled into the drawer. Not a coin. A cufflink back. Smooth and cold, the kind of detail you'd only find if you were looking. "Forgot to tell you," she said, slipping into leggings, voice gentle. "Mom wants us for dinner Sunday. You good with that?" "Yeah," I said, testing the weight of the not coin in my palm. "Family's good." She kissed my cheek. Warm skin, clean eucalyptus, and her eyes searched mine like she was checking a door she hoped was still locked. "Love you," she said. "The thing about doubt is it's loud in private, quiet in public." So I swallowed it and leaned into routine, set the alarm, brushed teeth side by side like a TV couple, climbed into bed, and stared at the ceiling where a moth cast a tiny spinning shadow. She fell asleep within minutes, the steady tide of her breathing counting for me. I lay there listening to the house talk, the tick of expanding metal, the puddled hush of the dishwasher, the wind nosing the window. At 12:37 a.m., her phone buzzed face down on the nightstand. One buzz, a pause, then another, like a heartbeat learning a new rhythm. I didn't touch it. Not then. I wanted to see what truth would do if no one called it out. The message preview was a knife with a smile. I told myself not to look. I told myself privacy matters even when suspicion begs. But the screen blinked again, bright enough to paint the room in a thin gray light, and there it was in white letters against the lock screen. Miss you already, followed by a face I'd never seen and a name I didn't recognize, Evan. No last name. Just a neat bubble of somebody else's intimacy trying to float in our dark. My throat felt lined with sand. I stared at the ceiling fan, waiting for numbers to turn into words I could use without shattering. Her breathing kept the beat. I could have woken her, demanded an answer right there in the sticky quiet. I could have played judge and jury in pajama pants. Instead, I reached for something soft, my side of the mattress, the cotton sheet, the promise I thought we were always making without saying it out loud. The phone buzzed again. You left fast. Still warm in your sheets. The gall of it made my teeth ache. He was talking about my life like it was a hotel room with a late checkout. I stood, careful, and padded to the kitchen. The floor was cool. The night smelled like rain threatening. I filled a glass and drank until the clamp on my chest loosened. When I came back, I stopped at the doorway and looked at her, the person I'd built routines around, sleeping with her hand tucked under her cheek like a kid. I thought about all the easy days stacked behind us, how trust is just layers of tiny choices, how fast a blade can slice through a rope you spent years braiding. At 1:04, the messages stopped. At 1:10, I opened the living room laptop, signed into our Wi-Fi router, and pulled the connected devices log. There it was, a Galaxy S23 that wasn't mine, tagged to our network for exactly 56 minutes that evening. I scrolled our doorbell history and found a motion clip with the face cropped by the frame, a shoulder in a slate jacket, a laugh cut in half by the closing door. The time stamp matched the cologne. I closed the laptop and sat in the blue glow until it timed out. I could feel my anger building like weather, air thickening, pressure dropping. I didn't want to be the storm everyone warns about. I wanted to be the person who asks a straight question and survives the answer. So in the morning I made coffee, set 2 mugs on the counter, and invited the truth to come sit between us. "Who's Evan?" I asked, and the mug trembled in her hand. The kitchen was bright with the clean light of an ordinary day. Birds were bargaining in the trees. The toaster released 2 slices like a magician's reveal. She shuffled in with sleep-heavy eyes and a sweatshirt pulled over one shoulder. For a second I almost forgot what I knew. It's strange how kindness can still move toward you on reflex, even when your body is braced for impact. "Thanks," she said, picking up the mug. "You're sweet." "Who's Evan?" I asked, and watched the steam bend into a question mark between us. She didn't answer immediately. Her head tilted like she was following a sound only she could hear. The silence stretched, thin ice over deep water. Finally, "A friend," she said. Every liar's favorite word. "A friend who knows what our sheets feel like." She put the mug down, clink of ceramic on wood. "You went through my phone?" "I read my kitchen," I said. "And my Wi-Fi logs. And the way the house smelled when I walked in. Your phone just said the quiet part out loud." Her eyes went glassy. She pressed fingers to the bridge of her nose like she could squeeze out a version of the story that didn't hurt as much. It was a mistake." She swallowed. "It's not what you think." "Then say what it is." She exhaled like a balloon losing shape. "We've been talking. It got physical once. I wanted to stop it. I told him that. He showed up when I said not to. I panicked. I thought I could end it clean if I just..." Her voice broke like a wet twig. "I'm sorry." The word fell between us and didn't soak in. I stared at the counter where my hands had cut limes last weekend for tacos. The boards still had faint green stains like proof that flavors linger. "Why him?" I asked, and I realized I was asking why not me. She leaned against the sink, eyes on the window. "He made me feel new," she said finally. "Not better. Just new. Like I wasn't stuck being this version of myself that knows what day the trash goes out and which neighbor won't bring the bins in. I hated that it mattered. I hate what I did." I looked at her and saw both things at once. The person I loved and the person who hurt me. I felt grief move through me like a slow train, each car labeled with something we built. I didn't want to punish. I didn't want to forgive on a timetable. I wanted air. "I'm leaving for a few days," I said. "I'll stay at Dan's. We'll talk after that. You'll text Evan and tell him if he shows up here again, I'll be the one answering the door." Her jaw trembled. "Okay." I took the keys, the spare phone charger, my wallet. The house watched me go, every familiar object now a witness. Out on the porch, the morning was so clean it almost felt like a lie, and I knew the hardest part hadn't even started yet. Healing didn't feel like a decision, it felt like a daily chore. At Dan's, the couch slept like it held 100 other tired men before me. The apartment smelled like old coffee and aftershave, and the traffic outside was a steady rush that made my thoughts easier to hear. I told Dan the basics. He didn't throw words at me like confetti. He handed me a blanket and sat nearby, letting silence do the heavy lifting. The first night, I replayed everything until dawn blurred the edges. The second night, I read every article the internet had to offer about betrayal and nervous systems and timelines that never apply to you. I learned how adrenaline can make you sprint to conclusions and how grief can make you kneel in rooms you built with your own hands. I took long showers, pressing my forehead to the wall, listening to water turn my skin pink. On the third day, she texted a photo of a message she'd sent Evan. "Do not contact me again. What happened was wrong. I'm telling him everything. Respect this boundary or I'll involve the police." He replied with a thumbs up and then 3 paragraphs of apology that sounded like a man performing regret. She blocked him. She sent me the screenshots like receipts. We met at a park bench because I didn't trust our kitchen yet. Late afternoon sun pooled in the grass. Kids shrieked happily at a fountain. Somewhere a dog shook itself, and its tags jingled like tiny bells. She sat with her hands folded, thumb tracing the red seam on her jeans as if she could stitch something shut. "I booked an individual therapist," she said, "and a couples counselor if we... The sentence couldn't find its ending. "I don't know where I land yet," I said. "I do know I'm not interested in a clean narrative. It doesn't have to be a villain story to be a wound. But if we try with honesty so brutal it's boring." She nodded, tears slicking her lower lashes. "Okay." We set rules that sounded like instructions for a fragile package. Daily check-ins, no late-night vanishing acts, transparency that wasn't performative but practical. It was clumsy. It was slow. It was sometimes so tender it made my ribs ache. Other nights, I drove past our street and kept going, windows down, letting cold air argue with the heat behind my eyes. Weeks later, I walked into our house again. The sheets were new. The window was shut. She'd moved the bed an inch to the left, a tiny shift that changed the way morning light fell across the pillows. I stood there and felt nothing break. Not relief, not rage, just a quiet, stubborn promise to take tomorrow as one small, possible thing. "Tea?" she asked from the doorway, voice careful. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded like it belonged to me again. Maybe we'd make it. Maybe we wouldn't. But the person I was now knew how to hear a room, how to read a silence, how to choose himself without shutting himself off. And as the kettle started to sing, I realized the scent in our bedroom was finally our own again, clean cotton and something hopeful, and I followed the sound of boiling water into a future I didn't recognize yet, but one I was ready to meet section by section, day by day. Story 2. He took the kids. He took the kids, and the house suddenly had too much air in it. It was supposed to be a normal Friday pickup, cereal bowls in the sink, a glitter trail from a school art project, the faint lemon of the cleaner still clinging to the table. He knocked early, smiling that polite, public smile he wears like a tie. "Ready, monsters?" he called, and they tumbled into shoes and backpacks and a cloud of crayons and chatter. The hallway still smelled like their shampoo when the door clicked shut. At 7 p.m., he texted, "Running late. Movie night. I'll drop them first thing." At 9:14, "They're asleep. Let them stay. At 10:03, we'll touch base in the morning." The messages were breezy, harmless sounding, like a neighbor asking to borrow sugar. By the time the dishwasher hummed and the porch light drew a pale circle on the step, the chairs around the table looked like empty theater seats after a show. I walked into their room and found the covers still warm, the stuffed fox on the floor where Emma dropped it mid-race, the Lego spaceship frozen mid-battle on the rug. I sat on the edge of the bed and listened to a neighborhood that didn't know anything had changed. A car door thud, a faint stereo, the wind stiffening the hedges. Morning came with a sky the color of a bruise. No kids. No car in the driveway at 8 a.m. or 9. My call went straight to voicemail, the robotic voice asking me to leave a message after the tone, the empty hallway handing the beep back to me. When he finally answered at 10:27, his voice was syrup. "They're comfortable here," he said. "Let's not disrupt them. I'll keep them for a bit. It's better this way. You don't get to decide that," I said, voice small and steady, like a string pulled tight on a kite. "The order says Sunday at 6. He sighed like I was being unreasonable about weather. "Let's be adults," he said, and the line went quiet except for road noise and a radio too low to catch. The silence afterward had edges. I could feel every corner of it. I picked up the stuffed fox and pressed its worn ear to my face. Fabric, dust, the citrus of their soap. It hurt like something rightful had been misplaced. I didn't cry. I stood up, opened the laptop, and started making a folder named Proof. If he wanted to rewrite the rules, I would learn the language they're written in and read them out loud. I kept every receipt, because he was counting on me not to. Screenshots, his texts, timestamps, school email reminders that I'd RSVP'd to conferences he couldn't make. PDFs, the custody agreement with its clean black lines and Sunday drop-off in bold. Photos, the lineup of shoes by our door, tiny soles still dusted with wood chips from the playground. I saved call logs, printed my calendar, highlighted the weeks I'd traded when he had work travel. That was really a boys' trip I'd found on Instagram, beers gleaming in sunset light. When I drove to his townhouse, the sky tasted like snow and the cold bit my knuckles on the steering wheel. The Ring camera pinged before I made it up the steps. His voice came tinned through the speaker. "Not a good time," he said. "They're resting. Don't make a scene. Put them on," I said steady. "Just to hear their voices." "Talk to your lawyer," he said, and the chime ended the conversation like a judge's gavel. Back home, the house had the warm, stale scent of a place that expected people. I opened the pantry and stared at the row of lunch snacks I'd packed without thinking. I could hear the therapist I'd seen after the divorce, a woman with soft sweaters and blade-sharp advice. When he tries to pull you onto his stage, step off. Don't perform. Document. So I called the clerk's office. The woman on the line sounded like she'd walked 1,000 frantic mothers through the same steps. "Emergency motion," she said. "Fill this. Bring that. Breathe." That night I lay on the floor by their beds like sleeping close to the absence would make it smaller. The heat clicked on and off. A neighbor's dog barked once, then twice, then gave up. I fingered the seam of the mattress where the fitted sheet had started to fray and thought about the way he used to pick fights on holidays. The way he liked an audience for both cruelty and charm. I remembered the day he called me too emotional, because I'd cried when Emma cut her own bangs, the day he laughed when I said I wanted them to know what safety felt like, what boring felt like. My phone lit the room with its cool square light. An email from school, Spirit Day Tuesday. Pajamas okay. I forwarded it to myself and added it to the folder like a prayer made of paperwork. If the system needed facts, I'd give it a tidy museum of them, labeled and lit. The timeline turned his story into a shadow that didn't match the body. I taped butcher paper across the wall and made a line like a road. I marked Fridays with sticky notes, drew little boxes for exchanges that happened and boxes with dark XS for the ones he forgot. I added the pediatrician's note from last month with the weight and height written in careful pen, the teacher's message about Emma's reading group, the photo the neighbor had snapped at the park of me pushing both kids on the tire swing. Midway down the line I stuck a screenshot from a public story his new girlfriend had posted. The kids at a trampoline park, his hand on the rail, caption bonus mom life with sparkles. In the background a clock reflected on a window, 10:52 p.m., well past the bedtime he used to lecture me about when I let them finish a movie at mine. I printed it, slid it into a plastic sleeve. The printer smell. Hot, metallic, a little inky, filled the kitchen. At the courthouse, the air felt recycled from last year. The fluorescence made everyone's face the color of boiled chicken. I filed an emergency motion and the clerk stapled my stack with a practiced whack. "Judge will see you Wednesday morning," she said. "Bring anything else you've got." Wednesday felt as far away as summer. I bought fresh pencils. I drafted an affidavit in plain, stubborn language. He withheld them beyond the order. I attempted contact. I have not consented to a schedule change. I didn't write a single insult, even though there was a whole language under my tongue for the ways he made rooms colder when he smiled. That night the wind pressed its palm to the windows, the trees scratched the siding like they were asking to come in. I boiled water for tea and read the agreement again, the words spare and unemotional. Sundays. 6 p.m. school nights not to be disrupted. Mutual right of first refusal. The paper didn't care about charisma. It didn't care about who told the better story at backyard parties. It only cared what happened. At 9:03 p.m., he texted, "They're fine. Don't be dramatic. We can figure this out without dragging strangers into it." I stared at the word dramatic until it lost its edges. The next morning, my phone lit up with his name, and I let it ring once before I picked up. His voice sounded like a siren far away. You can't tell if it's coming or going. "Look," he started, dropping into his reasonable man register. "This isn't abduction. It's parenting. They like it here. I'm just giving them stability. You're giving yourself leverage," I said. "Bring them back today." A beat, then a chuckle. "You always did love a scene. How about this? I'll keep them this week, you take next. No child support involved. Clean slate." I breathed in like the therapist taught, smell the soup, cool the soup. "No," I said. "See you Wednesday." He hung up without goodbye. The call left a hum in my bones, a ghost of noise. I packed my folder like a parachute, orders, screenshots, the timeline photo of the trampoline park clock. My hands shook only when I stopped moving. The courthouse smelled like coffee burned down to tar. His lawyer wore a navy suit the color of authority. He wore that smile that says mistake, not pattern. He called me inflexible. He said the kids were thriving with routine. He said I had always been anxious, that I, sometimes catastrophized, small things. He talked about my tears like they were proof instead of punctuation. When it was my turn, I didn't look at him. I looked at the judge, a woman with winter hair and a pen that clicked. I laid the papers down in order, let them speak in their square font voice. "The order," I said, and tapped the line. His texts. Tap. The ring transcript. Tap. The school notice I sent and he didn't respond to. Tap. The public post at 10:52 p.m. on a school night. Tap. The guardian ad litem, a stranger who'd spoken to both kids on FaceTime, cleared her throat. "They asked when they were going home," she said. "They said Daddy told them Mom was busy." She looked at him, just for a second, and then back at the bench. "I recommend immediate return per the existing order and a review of communication boundaries." The judge's pen stopped. The room went soft around the edges. "Sir?" she said to him, voice even. You do not unilaterally change custody. That is not how this works. Her order was clean and simple: immediate return, temporary restrictions on overnights outside the schedule, co-parenting classes, all communication through the app with read receipts, no surprises. I exhaled a month's worth of air all at once. The paper did what it promised to do, it held. But bringing them home was not the end of the story, just the start of the hard part. The first night back, they slept like survivors, sprawled, heavy, unconcerned with edges. We unpacked slowly. A crayon rolled under the couch and came out with dust bunnies attached. It smelled like wax and childhood. I held their jackets to my nose, outside air, a whisper of his detergent, and hung them by the door like we were replanting a flag. I didn't ask questions that made them pick sides. Did you eat? Did you have fun? Want pancakes tomorrow? Safety is sometimes the way you ask nothing and offer everything. At bath time, the bathroom filled with fog and giggles. Emma showed me a sticker she'd been guarding in her pocket like treasure. Daddy's friend Natalie gave it, she said, testing my face like a weather report. That was kind of her, I said, and meant only what the words said. Later, alone, I wrote to him in the court-ordered app, please don't introduce partners as family roles. Let's keep things neutral. The app stamped the message with a neat date and time, a tiny archivist making order out of a life. Over the next weeks, we built routines like scaffolding. Breakfast at the table, the scrape of chairs, the small negotiations about which book tonight, and how many pages. They started therapy with a woman whose office smelled like tea and clean wood, who had a bin of plastic animals and a way of listening that made my shoulders drop. I learned to narrate feelings without bleeding them into facts. It's okay to miss Daddy when you're here. It's okay to miss me when you're there. He tested boundaries like doors in a hallway, late drop-offs. Forgot my phone. Surprise requests penned in charm. I didn't take the stage. I forwarded to the app, to the folder, to the patients that had muscle now. He hated the mirror of paperwork. It doesn't clap or boo. One evening, after a month of ordinary days in a row, Emma fell asleep with a breadcrumb of cookie at the corner of her mouth. The house smelled like vanilla and laundry. I stood in the doorway and felt the strange relief of boredom, the quiet dignity of no crisis. My phone buzzed with a new message from the app, confirming Sunday drop at 6. It felt ridiculous to cry at a sentence that should have always been true, but my eyes burned anyway. I don't have a clean moral for you. I have a calendar with stickers and a folder full of dates and a spine a little stronger than it was. He still performs for an audience. I host bedtime and make sure the tiger gets tucked in first. That's the whole show. When storms lean in, I listen for the first fat drops and close the windows before the carpet gets wet. It's not a miracle. It's maintenance. And some nights, when the dishwasher sighs and the house settles and the fox's ear is ragged under my thumb, I remember the bruise-colored morning and breathe into the simple fact of here. Story 3. I got her fired. I got her fired, and I'm still not sure if it was justice or revenge. The office always smelled faintly of burned coffee and paper, that mix of stale caffeine and printer toner that makes every Monday feel the same. Our desks were lined up like cages in a zoo, each with a flickering monitor light making faces look tired. And then there was her. Jessica. The kind of coworker who could glide into a room and make people lean closer, like she carried better air around her. She wasn't my boss, not officially, but she treated me like she was. Nitpicking reports accidentally, CCing higher-ups when she thought I'd slipped, dropping sly little comments about my learning curve in meetings. For months, I let it roll off. I told myself this is what adults do. We put up with egos, we clock in and out, we don't start wars over staplers. But the thing is, she didn't stop at work. She started circling my personal life too. It began with little things. Side remarks about who I followed on Instagram, how often I left right at 5 o'clock, whether I ever stayed late to show commitment. Then she crossed into territory that felt like home invasion. She hinted to my girlfriend at the holiday party that I was getting close to someone in accounting. A joke, she called it later, with that smile that didn't ask forgiveness. The seed she planted grew. My girlfriend asked questions I didn't have rehearsed answers for. I felt accused in my own kitchen, standing over the smell of simmering pasta while defending myself against shadows Jessica had drawn on the wall. That's when something in me hardened. I stopped waiting for her to change. I started watching. And what I saw gave me more than ammunition. It gave me a choice I didn't think I'd have. Because Jessica wasn't nearly as careful with her own lies as she was with mine. Her downfall started with a coffee stain. She was always late to Friday status meetings, breezing in with hair still damp from the gym, latte in hand, apologies rehearsed in that sing-song tone. But this time, she bumped my desk on the way in, and her folder tipped just enough for the papers to fan out. And there it was, a quarterly report draft, but the numbers didn't add up. Literally. I stared at it for 5 seconds, brain doing the math on autopilot. She had inflated the revenue column by nearly 20%. Not a typo. A rewrite. At first, I told myself it was none of my business. Maybe it was a draft. Maybe I'd misread. But once you notice the thread in a sweater, you can't stop tugging. Over the next week, I kept an eye on the shared drive. Late-night edits. Versions disappearing. And then one evening, while everyone else was gone, I opened the trash folder. Rows of deleted files, all with her name stamped in metadata. She wasn't sloppy, she was strategic. Building a castle out of inflated numbers, deleting the foundations as she went. I should have stopped there. I should have brought it up gently, asked a question, given her a chance to spin it into some miscommunication. Instead, I saved everything. Screenshots. Timestamps. Version histories. My folder grew fat with receipts. And the more I had, the more my anger transformed from fear into focus. At night, lying in bed, I could hear the printer hum in my head, spitting out paper after paper with her fingerprints all over them. My girlfriend noticed the shift. "You're quieter lately," she said one night, the smell of her shampoo filling the room as she leaned against me. I wanted to tell her the whole thing, to say, I'm building a bomb out of evidence, and I don't know if lighting it makes me brave or cruel. Instead, I kissed her forehead and said I was just tired. But I wasn't tired. I was wired. Wired and waiting. And then came the meeting where she handed me the match herself. She threw me under the bus and gave me the wheel. Big client presentation. The kind of meeting that makes or breaks bonuses. The conference room smelled like new markers and nervous sweat. I'd prepped my slides for a week, every number checked twice, every graph clean. When it was my turn, I stood up, adjusted my tie, and started walking them through. That's when Jessica interrupted. "Actually," she said smoothly, clicking her remote to swap in her version of the numbers. My graphs dissolved, replaced by her inflated ones, shinier, more impressive, but wrong. "We've been trending even better than projected," she added, glancing at me like I was a child caught coloring outside the lines. A few heads nodded, impressed. The clients smiled. My stomach dropped. I could have stayed quiet. I could have swallowed the humiliation and let her own it. But my folder of evidence burned hot in my pocket. "Those aren't the figures I prepared," I said, voice steady but low. The room went still, eyes ping-ponging between us. Jessica's smile froze, thin as paper. "We should make sure the data's consistent before we move forward." She laughed it off, breezy. "Of course. Just a draft error." But I saw the flicker in the client's eyes, doubt planted, curiosity sparked. And that's when I knew, if I dropped the receipts, she wouldn't just bruise. She'd break. That night, I sat in my car in the empty parking lot, engine ticking as it cooled, folder open on my laptop. The glow lit my hands, and they didn't feel like mine. I drafted an anonymous email, attached the files, and addressed it to HR and the VP. My finger hovered. The car smelled like stale fries and stress. My chest felt like a locked drawer. And then I clicked send. The explosion didn't come immediately. It rolled in like thunder, distant at first, then shaking everything in reach. Monday morning, her desk was empty except for a plant and a silence. Rumors moved through the office like smoke under doors. HR. Investigations, financial inconsistencies, compliance review. She wasn't at her desk. She wasn't in meetings. The plant wilted slowly, leaves curling toward the cubicle wall. People whispered in break rooms, their voices bouncing off the smell of microwaved leftovers. Nobody said her name too loud. It was like speaking it might summon her back. 3 days later, the email went out. We wish Jessica the best in her future endeavors. Clean, cold, corporate. Her name vanished from the shared drive within hours, files reassigned like furniture after a breakup. By Thursday, the only trace was her mug in the dishwasher rack, a chipped ceramic thing that said Boss Lady in pink cursive. My boss called me in. The blinds were half closed, slanting sunlight across his desk. "We appreciate your diligence," he said, words careful, eyes sharper. "It's important we maintain integrity." He didn't ask if I'd been the one to send the email. He didn't need to. He gave me more responsibility. More visibility. A subtle nudge upward. That night, I told my girlfriend everything. The receipts, the meeting, the send button. She listened, silent, fingers tracing circles on her mug. When I finished, she set it down with a soft clink. "So, you destroyed her," she said. Not a question, not approval. Just a statement, laid flat between us. She destroyed herself. I argued, voice sharper than I meant. But her eyes stayed steady on mine, and I realized the line between justice and revenge was thinner than printer paper. I slept badly. Dreamed of coffee stains and disappearing folders. Woke to the smell of my own sweat, sheets tangled like evidence of a struggle. The office moved on. But I didn't, not really. Because firing someone doesn't end them. It just ghosts them into your memory, where they live louder than they did before. Her ghost showed up in the most ordinary place. 2 weeks later, I ran into her at the grocery store. Fluorescent lights, the hum of refrigerators, the faint smell of citrus from the produce section. She was in jeans and a hoodie, hair tied back, no corporate armor. For a second, we just stared. Her cart held eggs, bread, a bottle of wine. Mine rattled with frozen dinners and coffee pods. We looked like people, not enemies. "You," she said finally, voice quiet but sharp. Not an accusation, not a greeting. Just recognition. Her eyes flicked over me, weighing how much of her life I'd rewritten with one email. For a moment, guilt clawed my ribs. Maybe I should have said something human. Maybe I should have asked if she was okay. Instead, I said nothing. Just nodded and wheeled past, the citrus smell sticking to my clothes like judgment. That night, I thought about all the small things that had led to the big thing. The CCs. The jokes. The coffee stain. The click of a mouse. I thought about the office, humming on without her, and about the plant she'd left behind. Someone had watered it. It was alive. I don't know if I'd do it again. That's the truth. Part of me says yes, she played with matches, and fire burns. Part of me says no, I lit the pile, and I watched her go up in smoke. Both parts live here now, side by side, like coworkers in my own head. Every time I open a spreadsheet, I smell toner and remember her voice. Not what she said, how she said it. Like everything was a performance, and she was waiting for applause. And maybe that's the real ending, she's gone. But I still hear the echo of clapping that never came. Story 4. My brother stole my girlfriend. My brother stole my girlfriend, and the betrayal felt worse because he smiled when he did it. Family dinners were always noisy, plates clattering, the smell of garlic bread filling the kitchen, my dad telling the same joke about taxes like it was new. That night, though, the noise had a different edge. My girlfriend, Lena, sat next to my brother Jason. They laughed a little too easily, like they'd rehearsed the timing. His hand brushed hers reaching for the butter, and she didn't flinch. My fork scraped too hard against the plate, a sound like teeth on glass. I told myself I was imagining it. Jason's always been the golden boy, taller, louder, born with a grin that convinces people he's harmless. He'd borrow my clothes and return them with compliments from girls who never noticed me. I'd forgiven him 100 small thefts. But that night, watching Lena tilt her head just so when he spoke, I felt something heavier press on my chest. After dinner, I found her coat tossed on the back of a chair. Her perfume clung to the fabric, sweet and citrusy, familiar. Jason came up behind me, clapping my shoulder. "She's great, man," he said. "You've got a good one." He grinned, and it wasn't the grin of a brother. It was the grin of someone who knew a secret, and suddenly the whole house smelled like smoke to me. That night I couldn't sleep. And in the stillness I realized I wasn't imagining anything. I was already losing her. The proof came in whispers and shadows. A week later, Lena canceled on me, said she was tired from work. Her voice on the phone was clipped, like a stranger ordering takeout. But later that evening, scrolling through social media in the blue glow of my room, I saw Jason's story. A blurry photo of drinks at a bar, neon lights painting everything red. And there, unmistakable, Lena's scarf on the chair next to him. The same one I'd bought her last winter. My heart dropped into my stomach, hot and sour. I told myself maybe it was coincidence. Maybe she'd gone with friends, and Jason had just happened to be there. But I could hear the excuses unravel as soon as I tried to tie them together. The next morning, I confronted her. We sat in her car, rain dotting the windshield, the smell of damp upholstery heavy in the air. "Were you with Jason last night?" I asked, my voice shaking. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. She didn't look at me. "We ran into each other," she said too quickly. "It wasn't planned." "Then why didn't you tell me?" She swallowed, eyes fixed on the glass fogging from our breath. "Because I knew you'd take it the wrong way." The wrong way. As if there was a right way to find out your brother was the background to your girlfriend's excuses. I wanted to shout, slam the dashboard, demand answers that sounded like love. But instead I sat there, feeling the rain drum harder, and realized silence was sometimes the loudest alarm. By the time I opened the car door, I already knew she wasn't mine anymore. Not really. The betrayal showed itself in broad daylight. It was Jason's birthday. Family gathered in the living room, balloons squeaking against the ceiling, the smell of chocolate cake filling the air. Lena arrived late, hair damp from the drizzle outside, cheeks flushed. She walked in and, without hesitation, hugged Jason first. Too long. Too close. My mom clapped her hands, oblivious, while I stood there with plastic plates sweating in my hands. I caught their eyes meeting across the table, brief sparks like matches struck in secret. Every smile between them had edges now. When Jason leaned in to whisper something, Lena's laugh came out soft, private. My dad asked me to pass the knife for the cake, and I nearly dropped it because my palms were wet. After the candles were blown out, Jason slipped outside to take a call. I followed, the cold air hitting me like a slap. He was leaning against the porch railing, phone in his pocket, smirk already waiting for me. "You and Lena," I said. The words felt foreign on my tongue. He shrugged, careless, like he was talking about a shirt he'd borrowed. "Things happen, man." "Things?" My voice cracked. "She's my girlfriend." He leaned closer, the smell of smoke from the neighbor's chimney clinging to his hoodie. "Not anymore." The door creaked behind us. Lena stepped out, eyes darting between us. And in that instant, the silence, the shame, the unspoken confession, I knew I'd already lost the fight. The party went on inside. Out here, I felt the family I thought I had start to crack down the middle. Heartbreak doesn't just live in the chest, it seeps into the walls. I stopped going to dinners. Stopped answering group texts. The house I grew up in started to smell like betrayal whenever I walked through the door, garlic, bread, candles, and the bitter tang of their laughter clinging to my clothes. My mom asked questions I dodged. My dad gave me long looks over his glasses. Nobody said Jason's name, but it hung in the air like mildew. Lena moved her toothbrush out of my place quietly, one item at a time, until the bathroom counter was bare. I found one of her earrings under the couch cushion weeks later, a tiny stud glinting like a cruel joke. Nights stretched long. I replayed every moment, the scarf, the smirk, the way she tilted her head toward him. I kept asking myself, was it my fault? Did I leave space between us that he stepped into? The thought gnawed at me like a rat in the walls. Jason didn't apologize. He didn't even try. He paraded Lena at a friend's party 2 months later, his arm draped over her shoulder like she'd always belonged there. My phone lit up with messages from mutual friends. "Isn't that your ex?" The word ex stung more than I expected, sharper because it was true. I walked out of the party early, the night air cold and metallic in my lungs. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just drove until the gas light blinked on, headlights carving through empty roads, trying to outpace a betrayal that sat too deep in my chest. And somewhere along that drive, I realized forgiveness wasn't coming. Not for him. Not for her. Not yet. Time dulled the wound, but the scar stayed visible. Months passed. Seasons turned. My family tried to stitch over the rip, inviting me back for barbecues and birthdays. I showed up, but I didn't sit close. The smell of grilled meat and laughter felt different, like a song you once loved that now scratches your ears. Jason and Lena eventually fizzled. Too much heat, not enough roots. I heard about it through my mom, her voice careful, like she was setting a fragile vase on the table. Lena texted me once, "I'm sorry." 2 words, typed quickly, like she was late for something else. I stared at them until the screen went dark, then deleted the message. Sorry didn't rewind nights, didn't erase smirks, didn't give me back the way I used to look at family dinners. Jason and I still see each other. We nod, we speak about sports, about weather, about anything except the storm he started. Our conversations are drywall painted over, smooth on the surface, cracks hiding underneath. But here's the thing, I'm stronger now. Not because betrayal is noble, but because surviving it teaches you how to hear the warning notes before the song changes. I don't ignore laughter that feels too sharp, or smiles that hide secrets. The other day, I caught myself cooking garlic bread in my own kitchen. The smell filled the air, warm and familiar. I stood there, alone but steady, and realized it didn't hurt anymore. Because sometimes, healing isn't forgiving the thief. It's realizing the stolen thing wasn't worth keeping after all. Story 5. She lied about the baby. She told me the baby was mine, and I believed her. The night she told me, the world smelled like rain. We were sitting in my car outside her apartment, wipers clicking back and forth, headlights painting the street in pale streaks. She held my hand, eyes wide and shining. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, and my breath caught like the air had turned to stone. I remember feeling 2 things at once, terror and awe. My life tilted, edges blurred. Suddenly it wasn't just late-night takeout and Netflix anymore. It was cribs, bottles, the weight of a tiny heartbeat that might look like mine. I pulled her into my arms, pressing my face against her hair, which smelled like coconut and hairspray. "We'll figure it out," I promised. And I meant it. For weeks, I let that promise grow inside me like a second spine. I worked overtime, saving for strollers I'd never pushed. I imagined her belly swelling beneath loose sweaters. I told my mom over Sunday dinner, the garlic and roast chicken smell filling the room while she cried and said she couldn't wait to be a grandmother. My dad clapped me on the back so hard I nearly spilled my water. Everywhere I looked, the world bent itself around the idea of us becoming 3. And even though I was scared, I felt anchored for the first time in years. But the thing about anchors is, sometimes they're tied to lies. And I didn't know yet that the rope around me was already fraying. The cracks showed in her stories first. Doctor's appointments that shifted dates last minute. Phone calls she took in the bathroom, her voice muffled, too soft for me to catch. One evening, she showed me a sonogram photo, grainy black and white with a peanut-shaped shadow. I reached for it, hands trembling, but she pulled it back too quickly. "I'll frame it for you," she said, folding it into her purse. At night, lying beside her, I'd hear her breathing steady into sleep while my mind unraveled threads. She never seemed nauseous, never complained about fatigue the way my coworker had when she was expecting. Her body looked the same, weeks later. I asked gently if everything was okay, and she smiled too fast. "Every pregnancy's different," she said. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. So I did what people in love do. I pushed doubt into corners and piled trust on top of it like furniture hiding stains. But doubt is noisy. It creaks. It leaks. It finds ways to remind you it's still there. The reminder came in the form of her phone, buzzing at midnight while she showered. The screen lit the room in cold blue, and I saw a name I didn't recognize. A single preview line: "We'll talk about the test later." My hands went cold. I sat there staring at the glow until it died, until the sound of the shower stopped, until she stepped out smelling of soap and steam. I kissed her forehead like nothing had happened, but inside, my chest was burning. The next morning, I started looking for the truth she wouldn't give me. The truth came in a parking lot, in the cold. I drove her to a clinic one Thursday, pretending it was just another checkup. The lot smelled of exhaust and wet pavement, white lines gleaming under gray clouds. She told me to wait outside. "It'll be quick, boring paperwork." I sat in the car, fingers drumming the steering wheel, watching people come and go. After 20 minutes, I walked in. The receptionist smiled, asked if she could help me. I gave her my girlfriend's name, said I was the father. The woman's smile faltered just slightly. "She's not here today," she said. I froze. "But her appointment?" "There's no record," the woman replied, voice gentle but firm. When I stepped back outside, the air hit me like ice. My girlfriend was leaning against the car, scrolling her phone. "All done," she said brightly. "Everything's fine." My throat tightened. "You weren't in there." She blinked, laugh bubbling out too fast. "What?" "Of course I was. You probably asked the wrong person." But her eyes didn't meet mine. And suddenly, the sonogram photo, the shifting dates, the late-night messages, all of it sharpened into one jagged truth: she wasn't pregnant. Not with my child. Maybe not at all. I didn't confront her then. I drove home, the radio low, the air between us heavier than stone. She hummed along to a song, off-key, like nothing had cracked open. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles went white. That night, I opened a drawer, pulled out every receipt of overtime pay I'd saved, and realized I wasn't just losing her. I was losing the life I'd built in my head. When I finally confronted her, she didn't even flinch. We sat on the couch, TV glowing but muted, the smell of leftover pizza in the air. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. "Are you pregnant?" I asked. My voice sounded foreign, like someone else had spoken. She didn't look up from her phone. "Of course." "No," I said, sharper. "Don't lie. I went into the clinic. You weren't there. They had no record of you." Her face stayed blank for half a beat too long. Then she sighed, tossing her phone onto the cushion. "Fine. Not anymore. I lost it." The words hung in the air like smoke. My chest twisted. "When?" "Last month," she said flatly. "I didn't want to tell you. You'd make it a whole thing." I stared at her, at the way she chewed her lip like this was just another inconvenience. "You told me last week you had an appointment. You showed me a photo." Her eyes flicked, just once, toward her purse. "I didn't want to hurt you." But the lie was too neat, too rehearsed. And my heart knew before my head admitted it. There had never been a baby. She had used the idea like a rope, tying me to her, keeping me from drifting away. The realization tasted metallic, like blood in the mouth. And sitting there, watching her scroll again like the conversation was over, I understood the betrayal was deeper than lies. It was manipulation carved into my bones. Leaving felt less like a choice and more like survival. I packed in silence the next morning. Shirts folded, toothbrush shoved into a bag, receipts crumpled into my pocket. The apartment smelled like stale perfume and betrayal. She barely looked up from the bed, her hair messy, face expressionless. "So that's it?" she asked. "That's it," I said. My voice was steady, even though my chest felt like glass cracking under weight. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just rolled over, pulling the blanket to her shoulder like I was already gone. And maybe I had been for weeks. I drove until the skyline disappeared, windows down, cold air numbing my face. When I finally stopped at my parents' house, my mom hugged me so tightly I could smell the rosemary from her garden clinging to her sweater. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. Just that it was over. In the weeks that followed, I replayed it all: the rain-soaked confession, the sonogram photo, the fake appointments. I felt stupid. Small. But slowly, the weight lifted. I worked, I slept, I healed in the quiet way wounds do. Sometimes I still wonder if there ever was a baby. If she lost one and just couldn't face it, or if she'd made it all up from the start. I'll never know. What I do know is this: lies don't just break trust, they steal futures. And when I look in the mirror now, I see someone who survived the theft. Because the truth, no matter how cruel, is always lighter to carry than a lie. Story 6. My mom took her side. My mom chose her over me, and I don't think I'll ever forget it. The kitchen smelled like roast chicken and rosemary, a Sunday dinner I'd grown up believing meant safety. My girlfriend, Claire, sat across from me at the table, smiling politely, hands folded in her lap. My mom leaned toward her, eyes warm, voice soft, and said, "You deserve better than him sometimes." The words landed like glass shattering. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Claire's cheeks flushed, and she laughed nervously, but she didn't correct her. She didn't defend me. She just looked down at her plate, as if silence was an answer. I stared at my mom, the woman who'd kissed skin knees, who'd stood on soccer sidelines with a thermos of cocoa, who'd always said family comes first. "What's that supposed to mean?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to cut the gravy-thick air. My mom shrugged, unbothered. "You can be stubborn. Claire's patient. She puts up with a lot." The room went quiet except for the tick of the clock and the hiss of the oven cooling. I felt smaller than I had in years, like I was 12 again, grounded for something Jason had done. And that was the moment I realized, betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from the people who raised you. And the smell of rosemary hasn't felt like home since that night. The whispers didn't stop after dinner, they multiplied. I started noticing it every time we visited. Claire would sit with my mom on the couch, hushed voices carrying just enough for me to catch edges. My name. A sigh. Laughter that didn't include me. I'd walk in, and they'd straighten up like kids caught sneaking cookies. One afternoon, I found them in the garden, the air thick with the smell of wet soil and tomato vines. My mom was holding Claire's hand like a confidant. They both looked up when I came out, their conversation snapping shut like a book slammed closed. "What are you two talking about?" I asked lightly, though my chest felt heavy. "Just girl stuff," my mom said with a smile. But later that night, Claire repeated things I'd said in private arguments, words I'd whispered in frustration, sentences I knew I hadn't given her permission to share. And the way she said them, armed with my mom's phrasing, her judgments tucked into the corners, made it clear where the lines were being drawn. It wasn't just me and Claire anymore. It was me against Claire and my mom. And the walls of my childhood home started feeling less like shelter, more like enemy ground. I began avoiding dinners. But distance doesn't always stop betrayal. Sometimes it makes it easier for it to grow. The breaking point came at Thanksgiving. The house smelled like cinnamon and turkey, voices overlapping, football murmuring on the TV. Family gathered, plates stacked, laughter spilling. And then, it happened. In the middle of the meal, while everyone was passing dishes, my mom turned to Claire and said, "I don't know how you put up with him." Just like that. Casual. Loud enough for cousins and uncles and siblings to hear. The laughter died. Fork stilled. My ears rang with the weight of it. Claire chuckled awkwardly but didn't deny it. She didn't say, "That's not fair." She just let it hang in the air, like it belonged. Heat flushed my face. My chest tightened. "Seriously?" I snapped. The whole table froze. My dad cleared his throat, muttered something about focusing on the food, but the damage was done. Everyone had heard it. Everyone had seen my mom side with her, not me. I pushed back my chair, the legs scraping the hardwood like a scream. The room smelled like gravy and shame. "I'm done," I said, and walked out, leaving the warmth of the house behind for the cold November air. Standing in the driveway, I could still hear their voices muffled inside, carrying on without me. And that was when I realized they didn't need me to play the part anymore. They'd rewritten the script, and I was just the antagonist now. And once you're cast as the villain in your own family, there's no going back to being the hero. Silence became my armor. I stopped visiting for months. No Sunday dinners. No birthdays. Calls from my mom went unanswered until they dwindled into short texts. "Hope you're well. Claire stopped by, she looks good." Each one a twist of the knife, proof that while I kept my distance, Claire had only moved closer. I pictured them together, drinking tea in the kitchen that smelled like cinnamon, flipping through photo albums, my mom laughing at jokes that once were mine to share. I imagined them building a version of me out of scraps, stubborn, difficult, ungrateful. And maybe they believed it. Maybe, with enough repetition, it became true. Claire and I argued more. The fight smelled of stale wine and exhaustion. "Why does it bother you so much?" she asked one night, exasperated. "She loves me. Isn't that a good thing?" "Not when she loves you more than her own son," I snapped. Her silence was answer enough. The walls of our apartment felt thinner after that. My mom's shadow lingered in every corner, in every decision Claire made, every word she used that wasn't quite her own anymore. I felt outnumbered in my own life. And when the relationship finally broke, it wasn't just Claire I lost, it was the mother I thought I knew. Healing meant learning how to set fire breaks, even in family. Claire and I ended things on a rainy Tuesday, the apartment smelling of damp cardboard from boxes half packed. She said she loved me, but she didn't like the person I became around my mom. I almost laughed at the irony. Instead, I nodded, carried her things to the door, and let her walk out into the drizzle. My mom called, voice soft with concern that felt years too late. "You'll find someone new," she said. "Don't worry. Claire's a good girl." That was the last straw. "She was your girlfriend more than mine," I said and hung up. Months passed before I saw my mom again. When I did, it was at my sister's wedding. The church smelled of roses and candle wax, laughter echoing against stone walls. She hugged me, tentative, her perfume too sweet, too familiar. For the first time, I didn't feel small in her arms. I felt distance, not cruel, just necessary. Now, when I think of betrayal, I don't picture Claire. I picture my mom leaning across the table, choosing someone else in front of me. That scar stays, even if the wound closes. But here's what I've learned: family doesn't mean automatic loyalty. It means boundaries, even if they look like walls. And love, real love, never requires you to shrink so someone else can shine brighter. The rosemary smell of my childhood kitchen is gone for me. But I'm building new kitchens, with new recipes, where my name isn't spoken like a problem. Thanks for listening. If these stories pulled you in, don't forget to like the video and hit subscribe. It really helps keep these stories coming. And tell me in the comments, which betrayal hit you the hardest tonight?